Welcome to From Mild to Wild and everything in between. Today we're going to start, we've completed the engine, now we're going to start getting into the carburetor ignition. Before we get going, for you guys that don't know, this is where the carburetor sets. Sets up on top of the intake manifold. Now what you've got is as the fuel goes through the carburetor, through the intake, you remember them intake and exhaust valves that we had here, goes down through here and then it exits through the headers. These are headers here. I showed them to you on the first program. We didn't quite get a good shot of them, but what these are is these are actually a special coated header. They're coated on the outside and the inside. It's a special process. It keeps the heat off of the engine and the engine compartment and allows the exhaust fuel, the burnt exhaust to flow out much faster. That's something that you definitely want to take a look at. Now also last week I showed you how to adjust the valves. Now for me right now it's Thanksgiving. This has got to be a first for me, having my motor done by Thanksgiving weekend. But nevertheless, I've backed off my valves. I'm not going to be putting this in the car or firing it up for quite a time yet because we're just starting to get snow here. So what I've done is I've gone through and loosened up all the valves. You want to take the tension off of them springs because you do have a tendency to lose some pressure on the springs. Now without any further delay, let's take this carburetor here. This is my 780 CFM carburetor, and I want to grab this one here also. This is my 800. For some reason, this 780 up until last year actually ran better than my 800 CFM. But we're working on this fellow. As we go through, I'll show you the different modifications that I'm doing to try it. This guy should work better. And before it's all said and done, we'll get it to work better. But right now, I want to show you some of the pieces that you're going to be dealing with. I want you to pay close attention because there's a lot of horsepower being lost because they didn't know how to set the carburetor up. And I'm going to show you real quick. These are two springs, which I'm going to show you. This spring ran 114.92 miles an hour when I changed it to this spring. That's the only change I made, was going from one spring to another spring. I went to 118.12. Those two springs. What it does is it allows the secondaries to open up sooner or later. So you can see a simple change like this can mean the difference of 4 miles an hour. And we'll show you that. Jets. These are little fellas here. I started off on that particular day with a size 70 jet in the front of the carburetor. The first two rounds, the car went a 1.54 and a 1.55 for 60-foot time. That's 1.5 seconds if you don't understand what I'm saying. I took the 70s out and put 72s in. It cut my 60-foot time to 159.7 and 158.3. We're only talking 0.05 of a second. This is how close you can dial these carburetors in if you know what to do and when to do it. Because there's a lot of variables. Weather conditions, track conditions, humidity, all play an effect on this carburetor. But if you know what the pieces are, what to change, and what to look for, you'll be able to do it just like we do. On a daily basis, I told you, that's my documentation. I'm reading off that documentation again. Those were the first 4 runs on that day. The first 2, we kept the jets in, but we changed the spring. On the next 2, we changed the jets and left the spring in. So you can see, if you've got good documentation as to what you did and what worked, you can always go back under the same conditions and put that same change back in the carburetor. Now, let's get going here. This is what they call a 780 CFM poly carburetor. It's a vacuum operated secondaries. This one here is an 800 CFM mechanical operated secondaries. Now let me show you what the difference is. Turn it around so you can see it. Your accelerator rod is attached to here. So as you press on the accelerator pedal, it draws this linkage back right here. And if you'll notice, this arm is opening up this secondaries right here. That's at full throttle. Now let me show you from the bottom what it looks like. When I go full throttle, see the front one's open partially, then the back one starts to open up at the same time. See it? And I've started to stagger them because we want to get this guy working better than my 780. Now here's the 780. This rod here, you see how it slides? It does not open up the secondaries. What it does is when the secondaries are open and you release the throttle, that rod pushes the secondaries back and closes them. Let me just show you this from the front side. Can you see only the one side opens? That's what they call vacuum operated secondaries, and I'm going to show you, that's that spring we were talking about. Oh, I had a little fuel in that guy. There. Now let's start off with accelerator pumps. On this 780, I've got a 50 cc accelerator pump on the front side of this carburetor. Now, on the 800, on the front side of the carburetor, I've only got a 30 cc pump. But on the back side, I've got a 50. That's going to control the hesitation that you normally get, and you're probably used to it in your regular vehicle. When you just tap on the gas a little bit and the car doesn't quite take off, that's that accelerator pump. Now, with the accelerator pump, up on the top here, you've got these squirters. On this particular mechanical secondaries, you've got a squirter in the front and a squirter in the back. The number in the front can run anywhere from a 25, 28, 30, 32. On the back side, you're normally running a 35, 36, 37. You want, because you've got a bigger pump on the back side, you can put a bigger nozzle back here. And this is what they look like. Nothing more than the fuel comes up through and discharged through these two nozzles right here. Now, on this carburetor, with only the single 50 cc pump, I've got a 35 or a 31. I'd have to check the paperwork. I'll check it. Accelerator pump on there. I've got a 31 cc or a 31 squirter on the front of this carburetor. So now you can see that as you press this cam, this plunger is pushed down, and as it's pushed down, it delivers the fuel through the carburetor and comes up through and out on your nozzle here. Now you can control the flow through this system here with these cams. This would be a cam that you'd put in, and there's usually 2 holes in here, and some have 3 holes. So by adjusting the screw hole on the side, you can position this in a different location, so as you step on the gas pedal, you can either get fuel sooner or later. And there's a series of them that we were going to show you, so you know that you can tailor this accelerator system for any needs, whether it be street, strip, or just pleasure driving. But you at least have to know that there are pieces available for you to do that. Remember, you've got the 30 and 50 cc pump. You've got the different nozzles, which allows more or less fuel to come. And then you've got the cams that you can change to make it come sooner or later. Now on this particular one here, I want to show you what this consists of. This is where that spring goes. It's nothing more. You've got a rubber diaphragm which sets down inside of here, and it only goes in one way. There's a little notch because you're going to be pulling vacuum out of there. You set the top on like that. Now let me back up 1 second. There is a check ball, a tiny BB, if you will, inside of here. I normally take them out. What happens to me is I forget that they're in there from one season to the next. They get a little rust on them, and then you go to the track or you're out on the street and you forgot, and all of a sudden you're wondering how come the car's not going. What it does is it stops the vacuum from opening or closing your dash pod here. So I just rather take it right out right off the bat, and I know they don't like me to do that. But I take it out and I'll tailor it through the springs. Instead of trying to rely on that check ball, the check ball what it actually does is allow it to open and close a little bit slower. So it's a little bit smoother than without the check ball in there. But I've had it happen to me 2 or 3 years where evidently got a little condensation in there and it's stuck. And at my first run at the track, I didn't have the secondaries working, so needless to say, I come back in the pits and I've heaved several of these across the track. But that's what it consists of. In other words, putting one together, this one here I used to mark them. This one here's got a silver spring without the ball. And what it does is it goes up and down. If I suck down this little hole right here to simulate vacuum, it would actually suck this up. Then when you released it, it would go down. And that's what's opening up your secondaries on your carburetor. This action actually opens and closes the secondaries with the spring, and I'm going to show you on mine. For years I had 2 or 3 of them already put together. So when I went to the track, it was nothing more than taking 3 screws out because you have a tendency to, the diaphragms get caught. So I had 2 or 3 of them already put together, and I wrote on them with magic marker what was in there. They come out with a nice new trick here. This is the one right here. That's all you do is instead of taking the whole housing off, they've replaced this top cover. So with 2 screws, and this is a real quick thing to do between rounds. With 2 screws, I can remove that top and I've got access to that spring. There's a large hole with a gasket here, and that's the spring that I told you. Let me catch that one that I had. This was the silver, that was the purple. That was the quick change that I made, and you can see how long did it take me. If you wanted to time me, I could probably do it in less than 20 seconds. You change this spring and it'll open or close the secondaries when you want them to. When I went from this silver spring to this purple spring, I actually picked up 4 miles an hour. Now, it helped me in the next 2 rounds of eliminations that I went to because I had to spot my opponent. I caught him in the tracks because normally when you're running an 11.3, 11.4 car, you're usually down into a 112, 114, 115 mile an hour car. Well, with mine, I'm at 118. So with the additional miles an hour, I caught these 2 fellows probably within 1 foot of the finish line and went on past them. And that's what you're looking to do. You don't be afraid of these carburetors. You've got to tinker with them a little bit. But that's one thing that I wanted to show you. I indicated, now you can see that's all you do is you put it back on and tighten up the 2 screws, and I do just like I'm doing a torque job here. I go back and forth. I don't want to crack nothing or break nothing or force it. But this is something that real quick you'll know if you were successful or not, because the next time you went out, you're either going to get an awful bog. If they open up too soon because there's no accelerator pump on the back, you're going to, as the car goes, you're going to get an awful bog. Oh, it's going to lay over on you. You want to keep going with these springs until you've got the exact, where you can't feel that little hesitation when them secondaries are open. A lot of guys like the feel of it. It feels like a passing gear. That's not what you're looking for. You want a very smooth transition as them secondaries open. So you keep going up or down, whichever way you want to start with, because when you buy the kit, you're going to get 5 or 6 different springs in there. Now, speaking of the springs, I've got 3, 6, 7 different springs on the bench here. The problem is, over a period of years, they're color-coded. There's brown, there's purple, there's silver, there's yellow. And what happens is, they're not all the same. A spring is a spring is a spring. So what you want to do, and what I do, is I actually take like a little gram scale, and it's got ounces on it, and I put 2 1/4-inch bolts on there, and I take the spring, let me get this purple guy here, and I press down until it bottoms out on those 2 1/4-inch bolts. Now, I'm always looking for a measuring device. I need to be able to compare one to another. A lot of times my measuring devices are very crude, but this works, because what you can do is, if I take each one of them springs and do the same procedure, regardless of whether it's light or heavy, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to compare all the springs to one another. This will compare them. Now, on my little 3x5 card here, what I've done is the plain spring comes out to be 13.5 ounces at 1/2 inch. Those 2 nuts put together is equivalent to 1/2 inch of space. Now, I also have some where I've taken the 1 nut off and used just 1, and that would be the 1/4-inch measurement. But you want to be able to check them and write them down, because if you need to make a change, I found out that I have a long and a short silver spring, and they're of 2 different weights. But anyways, the plain spring was 13.5 ounces, the purple spring is 9 ounces, the brown spring is 14 ounces, the yellow spring is 7.5 ounces. So you can see between all of these springs right here, there's a difference. See them right down over here? They're all different. I really don't care what the manufacturer says they are. I'm going to go by my own measurements, because you can see some are taller than others. How would you figure it out? Well, it's got a black, it's got a brown, it's got a black. I really don't care. When you figure out how to measure each individual one, now if you're at 13 ounces of pressure and you want them to open up a little bit sooner, look for one that's 9, 10, 11 pounds. So that's a real good way. That's probably the best way that I found to be able to test the springs. It's nothing more than going up and down and allowing them secondaries open. I may be dwelling on it, but this is something that you can see. If you could pick up 4 miles an hour just by taking out 2 screws and changing the spring, by all means do it. But you're going to get 5 or 6 springs, and you're going to have to try each individual one, because all vehicles are different. Weight, converter, transmission, rear end, tire size, there's a lot of variables that will affect it. What works good on my car may not work on your car. It doesn't matter. As long as you know how to tailor your own car with the parts that you've bought, you don't have to worry about it. I don't want you to be afraid of carburetors. I'm going to show you ignitions also, but this is something that's going to make or break you. I get guys in here every day for adjustments, for advice, for whatever the case may be. I don't want you to be afraid of them. This is something that once you have had them apart and you've seen the pieces in there, you'll see they're really not that threatening. They're very simple to do. I do them all the time, so it's kind of second nature to me, but I want you to be able to do your own. Now remember the springs. Remember the accelerator pump. Remember the cams on the accelerator pump. Now let's take this front bowl right off here. It's fastened on with 4 screws. Oop, wrong side. Let me try this side. I want the front side. That was the back side. I don't want to show you the back side just yet. Let's work on this front side because that's where that accelerator pump is. You take your 4 screws out. Here's where that accelerator pump is. That, whether you've got a 30 or a 50, that's where it is. And that's what happens. There's a little hole here which is channeled up through the carburetor. So as you depress that, it sends the fuel up to the top and squirts it out. Now inside here, this is what you're probably going to see. This is the float. This is what allows the fuel to come in and be shut off. They come through with a brass float right here. I've gone ahead and replaced mine with neoprene only because they've already been grooved. You remember them jet extenders that we talked about? My jet extenders would hit on this brass bowl. So I bought the neoprene ones. Not only that, I've had it where we used to have a backfiring problem, and you'll get it every once in a while. If you backfire the carburetor, you can collapse because these are hollow. You can collapse the float bolt, this brass float, and then it runs you into all kinds of trouble because now you can't figure out what you did. You got to take the carburetor apart to see. So I stopped using the brass, but they're all right. I stopped using the brass and I went to the neoprene right here. It's black in color, and you'll see it's got 2 cutouts right here where it's red. Now, what holds that, or what allows the fuel to go in and out, right up here in the top, and I just took one out, is the adjustment. This is your float needle and seat. And what it's got is right on the bottom, as that float is floated up, it shuts off. It actually puts that pin up and shuts off the fuel. So as you use some fuel and the float level drops, this opens up and it fills it back up, and like that. So it's nothing more than an open and closed type of unit that allows the fuel to come in, and when you've got enough fuel based on your setting, it closes it off. Now there's a couple different needles and seats. The stock one has got a little rubber point on it, so when it closes, it stops the fuel. This, I think, is a 92 or 96 opening. I went to the metal ones. These are actually for alcohol carburetors. I went to the metal ones because they've got a larger hole. The inlet side of this is 130 thousandths versus somewhere in the 90 thousandths on this one. So it does you no good if you put a lot of fuel pump on it if you can't get the fuel down into the bowl where it belongs. So this is something you want to take notice to. Not only that, when I've had some dirt in the gas, the little pieces of sand will actually stick in the rubber. So, you know, you can take them apart and clean them, but unless you put them underneath a machinist magnifying glass, you can't see them. You put them back together, and they're just barely flooding over on you. That's the problem. So a lot of times you'll be replacing these, whereas with the steel ones, you take them out and you wash them off pretty good, and you blow dry them with the air hose, and you can put them right back in and reuse them. The only thing I found is sometimes you may have to put a little bit of a seat on them. Because it's metal to metal, you actually take the bottom and spin it just a little bit to put a groove around that, and then they'll seal off for you. But that's what you want to look at too. A lot of times it's a matter of a little float where I can get more fuel into my carburetor than you can. And that's that little bit of an edge that you're always looking for. And when, like me, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years. I'm always looking for that little bit more knowledge or performance that maybe my opponent doesn't know about. And this is one of the cases right here. Now, I'm going to take the front off of here. You saw these little whistles here. What this is you've got an opening, an air vent right here. And when you accelerate hard or hit the brakes hard, it has a tendency to come up out of this tube. So I put these little slosh tubes on. You just drill a hole and put a pin in there. You put these little slosh tubes on, and it keeps the fuel from coming out of the carburetor under hard acceleration or hard braking. Now here's that power valve. This is the one that I told you on the front side of my carburetor. I've got a 5.0 power valve in there. Remember, there's different gauges that you can use. Front side's got the 5.0. I've got it just under where my idling vacuum is. This car will actually sit there at 6.5 inches of vacuum at an idle. I want this fella closed at an idle, so I put a 5.0 power valve in there. The problem with this is when you're running on the highway, I'm going down a highway at 60 miles an hour, my vacuum is actually 10, 12, 14 inches of vacuum. So when I throttle the gas just a little bit, I've got a little hesitation, because in order for me to get that extra little shot of gas, I've got to get down to 5 inches of vacuum. It's not enough to aggravate me. It's just to let you know that if you wanted to go a little bit higher on a power valve, you can. And that would be the thing you're looking for. If you've got that little hesitation, that little transition hesitation, because the power valve is not quite open, you've got that little dead spot in the gas, that could be your culprit. This is something that, there again, if you want to tailor this, this is the way to do it. Now, on the top side here, for you guys that have got carburetors, you'll notice that the choke tower is gone. I've actually machined the choke tower off. I don't need a choke because I only run it in the summer months. Not only did I machine this off, over a period of time, I've actually gone in and smoothed down the sides and actually cut down the inside. Let me show you on this one. I indicated to you earlier, this fellow doesn't perform as well as the other one. It's not a fuel problem, because I could put all the fuel in there I want. It's an air problem. If you noticed, I've started to, you see that shiny surface on both sides here? I've started with my little grinder. I'm going to grind this smooth, or actually to look, let me see there, to look like the other one. I've ground this out. This used to be right up to the top here. So I've actually taken out another 3/4 of an inch. But I'm going to work at it a little at a time until I get this carburetor to outperform that carburetor. And it's very easy to do. I want to get into fuel pumps. I showed you on the first program, I run the electric fuel pumps, and this is what they look like. This one's a little tired, so I'm using it as a siphon pump. But I run 2 of these fuel pumps. I run them, they come through at 14 pounds of pressure. I jump them up to 19 pounds of pressure by putting the auxiliary spring in. When you do that, you got to remember to put a regulator on it, because your carburetor here is only going to accept between 7 and 8 pounds of pressure. So you got to reduce that 14 or 19 down to 7. I see we're running out of time right now. We're going to pick this up again next week. But don't forget my motto, do drags, not drugs, and I'll see you at the racetrack.